Elisabeth of Austria was Queen of France from 1570 to 1574 as the wife of King Charles IX, a member of the House of Habsburg. She was the daughter of Maximilian II, Holy Roman Emperor, and Maria of Spain. Early years. Elizabeth was the fifth child and second daughter of her parents' 16 children, of whom 8 survived infancy. During her childhood, she lived with her older sister Anna and younger brother Matthias in a pavilion in the gardens of the newly built Stolberg, part of the Hofburg Palace complex in Vienna. They enjoyed a privileged and secluded childhood, and were raised in the Roman Catholic religion. Her father Maximilian visited her often, and Elizabeth seems to have been his favorite child. She resembled him, not only in appearance but also in character. Elizabeth was just as intelligent and charming as her father, with her flawless white skin, long blonde hair and perfect physique. She was considered one of the great beauties of the era. She was also regarded as demure, pious, and warm-hearted, but naive and intensely innocent because of her sheltered upbringing. Still, she was intellectually talented. Elizabeth's brothers were educated by the Flemish writer and diplomat Auguste Giselinde Busbeck. The curious princess soon joined and even overshadowed them in the studies. Her mother Maria personally supervised the religious education of her daughters, and from her early childhood Elizabeth was impressed by her namesake St. Elizabeth of Hungary and reportedly took her as a model. Very early, around 1559, a match between Elizabeth and the Duke of Orleans, the future King Charles IX of France, was suggested. In 1562, the Maréchal de Vieilleville, a member of the French delegation sent to Vienna after seeing the 8-year-old princess, exclaimed, "Your Majesty, this is the Queen of France." Although Vieilleville was not entitled to make an offer, Elizabeth's grandfather, the Holy Roman Emperor Ferdinand I, appeared interested. Gifts were exchanged and contacts initiated between the two courts, but no one bothered to teach French to the young princess, Queen of France. Only in 1569, after the failure of marriage plans with Frederick II of Denmark and Sebastian of Portugal, the French offer was seriously considered. Catherine de' Medici, mother of Charles IX and the power behind the throne, initially preferred Elizabeth's elder sister Anna, but the latter was already chosen as the new wife of her uncle King Philip II of Spain. Catherine de' Medici finally agreed to the marriage with the younger Elizabeth, as France absolutely needed a Catholic marriage in order to combat the Protestant party, the Huguenots, as well as to cement an alliance between the Habsburg and the French crown. Elizabeth was first married by proxy on the 22nd of October 1570 in the Cathedral of Speyer. Her uncle, Archduke Ferdinand of Further Austria-Tyrol, standing as proxy for Charles IX. After a long celebrations, on the 4th of November she left Austria accompanied by high-ranking German dignitaries, including the Archbishop-Elector of Trier. Because of bad weather upon arrival in France, where constant rain had made roads impassable, the decision was taken to have the official wedding celebrated in the small border town of Mézières, in Champagne. Before reaching her destination, Elizabeth stayed in Sedan, where her husband's two younger brothers Henry, Duke of Anjou, and François, Duke of Alençon, greeted her. Curious about his future wife, Charles dressed himself as a soldier and went to Sedan, where he mixed in the crowd of courtiers to observe her incognito, while his brother Henry was showing her the architecture of the fortress of Sedan. Charles was reportedly delighted with the sight of her. King Charles IX of France and Archduchess Elisabeth of Austria were formally married on the 26th of November 1570 in Mézières. Charles, Cardinal de Bourbon, performed the ceremony. The occasion was celebrated with immense pomp and extravagance, despite the dire state of French finances. The new queen's wedding gown was of cloth of silver sprinkled with pearls, and her tiara was studded with pearls, emeralds, diamonds, sapphires and rubies. Because of the difficult journey and the cold weather, at the beginning of 1571 Elizabeth fell ill. Since the wedding took place far away from Paris, it was only in the spring that the German-French alliance was celebrated once again with magnificent feasts in the capital. On the 25th of March 1571, Elizabeth was consecrated as Queen of France by the Archbishop of Reims at the Basilica of St. Denis. The new queen officially entered Paris 4 days later on the 29th of March. Then, she disappeared from public life. Elizabeth was so delighted about her husband that she, to general amusement, did not hesitate to kiss him in front of others. However, Charles IX already had a long-term mistress, Marie Touchet, who famously quoted, "The German girl doesn't scare me." After a brief infatuation with his teenage bride, Charles IX soon returned to his mistress. However, the royal couple had a warm and supportive relationship. Charles realized that the liberal ways of the French court might shock Elizabeth and, along with his mother, made an effort to shield her from its excesses. In addition, Catherine de' Medici made sure that her new daughter-in-law was kept out of the affairs of state. Elizabeth spoke German, Spanish, Latin and Italian with fluency, but she learned French with difficulty. Also, she felt lonely in the lively and dissolute French court, yet one of her few friends was her sister-in-law, Margaret of Valois, who was not known for her virtue. Busbeck, her former tutor who accompanied her to France, was made Lord Chamberlain of her household. Elizabeth, shocked with the licentious ways of the French court, dedicated her time to embroidery work, reading and especially the practice of charitable and pious works. She continued to hear Mass twice a day, and was appalled at how little respect was shown for religion by the supposedly Catholic courtiers. Her one controversial act was to make a point of rejecting the attentions of Protestant courtiers and politicians by refusing the Huguenot leader, Gaspard II de Coligny, the permission to kiss her hand when he paid homage to the royal family. Despite her strong opposition to Protestantism in France, she was horrified when she received news of the St. Bartholomew's Day massacre begun on the 24th of August 1572, and which continued for several days afterwards, when thousands of French Protestants were slaughtered in Paris. According to Brantam, the following morning, shocked upon learning from someone in her entourage about the massacre, she asked if her husband knew. Told that he not only knew about it, but was its initiator, exclaimed, "Oh, my God! What is this? Who are these counselors who gave him such advice? My God, I ask of you to forgive him." Then she asked for her Book of Hours and began to pray. During those days, Elizabeth was given petitions to speak for the innocent, and she managed to assure a promise to spare the lives of the foreign Protestants. Quite advanced in pregnancy at the time, she did not publicly rejoice at so many deaths, like other prominent Catholics did. 2 months later, on the 27th of October 1572, Elizabeth gave birth to her first and only child, a daughter, in the Louvre Palace. The child was named Maria Elizabeth after her grandmother, Empress Maria, and Queen Elizabeth I of England, who were her godmothers. By the time of her birth, the health of Maria Elizabeth's father was deteriorating rapidly, and after long suffering, in which Elizabeth rendered him silent support and prayed for his recovery, Charles IX died on the 30th of May 1574. Elizabeth wept tears so tender and so secret, according to Brantam, at his bedside. After having completed the 40 days mourning period, Elizabeth, now called La Reine Blanche, as by custom, White clothing was worn by the widow of the deceased King of France after the initial mourning period was compelled by her father to return to Vienna. Shortly before, Emperor Maximilian II made the proposition of a new marriage for her, this time with her deceased husband's brother and successor, King Henry III of France. However, she, as well as Henry, firmly refused. By letters patent dated the 21st of November 1575, Henry III gave her the county of La Marche as her dower. In addition, she received the title of Duchess of Berry. In 1577 she obtained the duchies of Auvergne and Bourbon in exchange. On the 28th of August 1575, Elizabeth visited her almost 3-year-old daughter in Amboise for the last time, and on the 5th of December she left Paris, without her little Marie Elizabeth, a daughter of France, who remained in the care of her grandmother, Queen Mother Catherine de' Medici. Elizabeth would never see her daughter, the young Madame de France, again. Widowhood and death. Back in Vienna, Elizabeth lived at first in the residence of her childhood, Stolberg. On the 12th of October 1576, her beloved father Maximilian II died, and her brother Rudolph II succeeded him as Holy Roman Emperor. Her last great tragedy came on the 2nd of April 1578, when her 5-and-a-half-year-old daughter Maria Elizabeth died, when a new proposal of marriage was made to her, this time from King Philip II of Spain after the death of his wife Anna in 1580. She again refused. According to Brantam, she replied to the offer with the famous phrase, "The queens of France do not remarry," once said by Blanche of Navarre, widow of King Philip VI. In France, where Busbeck managed her properties, Elizabeth built a Jesuit college in Bourges, although she never received the monetary revenues from her domains. In early 1580, Elizabeth bought some lands near Stolberg and founded the convent of Poor Clare's Mary, Queen of Angels, also known as the Queen's Monastery. Elizabeth henceforth devoted her life to following the example of her convent's holy patron in the exercise of piety, relief of the poor, and health care. Even impoverished daughters of the nobility found her support. She also financed the restoration of the All Saints' Chapel in Radkany, Prague, which had been destroyed in a fire in 1541. Elizabeth acquired several relics for her convent. In 1588, she obtained the consent of her brother Maximilian, as coadjutor of the Teutonic Order, to have some of the bones of St. Elisabeth of Hungary, placed in Marburg, sent to her. After her departure from France, Elizabeth maintained a regular correspondence with her sister-in-law Queen Margaret of Navarre, and when the latter was ostracized from the rest of the royal family, she made half of the revenues she received from France available to her. Brantam relates that on one occasion, Elizabeth sent to Margaret 2 books written by her, a devotional work and a historical work. Elizabeth died on the 22nd of January 1592, victim of pleurisy, and was buried under a simple marble slab in the church of her convent. About her death, Brantam wrote, "When she died, the Empress said, 'El mejor de nos otros es muerto.'" In the course of the Josephinist reforms, the Queen's Monastery was closed in 1782 in order to create the Lutheran City Church. By order of Emperor Joseph II, Elizabeth's remains were transferred to one of the crypts beneath St. Stephen's Cathedral, Vienna. In her will, Elizabeth donated money not only to the poor and sick, but also included funds for prayers for her late husband in the convent's church. Her Spanish, German, French, Italian and Latin books from her library, a number of works of the Jesuit preacher Georg Scherer, a book of prophecies of the French astrologer Nostradamus written in 1571, and the tragedy of Antigone of the ancient Greek poet Sophocles were left to her brother, Emperor Rudolph II. Her wedding ring was given to another brother Ernest. Ancestry.